Hello Anatomy School. This is the anatomy of the skull. The skull is a bone protective cavity for the brain. The skull is composed of 4 types of bone: cranial bones, facial bones, ear ossicles and hyoid bone. However, 2 parts are more prominent, the cranium and the mandible. In humans, these 2 parts are the neurocranium and the viscerocranium, facial skeleton. That includes the mandible as its largest bone. The skull forms the anterior-most portion of the skeleton and is a product of cephalisation, housing the brain, and several sensory structures such as the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. In humans, these sensory structures are part of the facial skeleton. Functions of the skull include protection of the brain, fixing the distance between the eyes to allow stereoscopic vision, and fixing the position of the ears to enable sound localization of the direction and distance of sounds. In some animals, such as horned ungulates, mammals with hooves, the skull also has a defensive function by providing the mount, on the frontal bone, for the horns. The English word skull is probably derived from Old Norse skull, while the Latin word cranium comes from the Greek root cranion, cranion. The human skull fully develops 2 years after birth. The junctions of the skull bones are joined by structures called sutures. The skull is made up of a number of fused flat bones and contains many foramina, fossae, processes, and several cavities or sinuses. In zoology, there are openings in the skull called fenestrae. The human skull is the bone structure that forms the head in the human skeleton. It supports the structures of the face and forms a cavity for the brain. Like the skulls of other vertebrates, it protects the brain from injury. The skull consists of 3 parts, of different embryological origin: the neurocranium, the sutures, and the facial skeleton. Also called the membraneous viscerocranium. The neurocranium, or braincase, forms the protective cranial cavity that surrounds and houses the brain and brainstem. The upper areas of the cranial bones form the calvaria, skullcap. The membranous viscerocranium includes the mandible. The sutures are fairly rigid joints between bones of the neurocranium. Except for the mandible, all of the bones of the skull are joined by sutures, synarthrodial, immovable joints formed by bony ossification, with Sharpie's fibers permitting some flexibility. Sometimes there can be extra bone pieces within the suture known as wormian bones or sutural bones. Most commonly these are found in the course of the lambdoid suture. That's all. Please comment and subscribe. Thanks. Goodbye.